Hey, I remembered today. Thank you all so much for coming today to the exchange. This is a place where staff and volunteers can share ideas and we can find out what ways we can do things a little bit differently. And as Ellen already said, we can think outside the box and inside the box in any way we need to, just to make sure that we're enjoying our service with AARP. Today's topic is one, of course, like we come up with these topics a year in advance, and we said, well, by August, we should be thinking about involving volunteers in planning for 2024, because we know that the next year is going to come. You know, it does come, and that means we need to be thinking about that. So, Ellen, would you like to begin the questions today?
We were just talking a little bit about this, but so the question is for everybody to either put in the chat or say out loud. How did you involve volunteers in your planning for 2023? And were those efforts successful for yourself, volunteers, staff?
Okay. Ellen, would you like to repeat that one more time?
Sure. How did you involve volunteers in your planning for 2023?
So can I just say that as far as 2023 went for us, we were just coming off of being in virtual, moving into in-person. So it was really nothing that we could get volunteers formally engaged into doing strategic planning. I think we just went and said different events that we think that would like to happen. And I think that on a higher level within the state, they may have done a little bit more strategic planning, but I really can't use 2023 as a guideline, only because we were just in such a state of flux. And I don't know how many other state offices were in the same situation.
Does anyone else have the same or different experiences? Still blaming it on COVID.
Ellen, I think Greg Crawford put a comment in the chat. Greg, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
All my switches here. So yes, I'm relatively new as a volunteer portal champion, and I serve on our volunteer support team. And I think we're still trying to come out of virtual and really get an assessment of who's really here and who's not. You know, things have been awfully quiet. We're working with the Office of Volunteer Engagement to do some strategic thinking, and I haven't got the right title for the process, but we're trying to begin to come together again and looking at maybe doing our strategic planning for 2024 in that sense, with some sort of an event. I get envious of other states that they have all kinds of things going on, both for members as well as volunteers. But at this stage, I'm so new to it, you know, I don't know how far to push until everybody's probably at the same level of understanding of what we're at.
I also feel like this may be, you may get some different answers depending on who you're asking. If you're asking volunteers for their opinion on how it worked, and then if you're asking staff for their opinion on how it worked. Speaking to like just getting back after being virtual and going to in-person. I think there's a lot of things that are being tried, thrown at the wall and seeing if they stick or not, shall we say. And I know this was kind of called a year of learning, trying all of that too.
It looks like Jackie has her hand up.
Yes, she does.
I was just going to sort of echo what a lot of people are saying. I think we're still trying to find what's normal and whatever that looks like. But we're doing hybrids a lot with meetings so that we're gradually getting back into more in person, which is wonderful because being able to sit down next to somebody in a meeting. We just started a Santa Fe, New Mexico community presence site in Santa Fe. And we are meeting in person on a monthly basis and getting involved. So it's starting to look different, but I think like a lot of people, we're still trying to find that solid footing and move forward, but it's starting to get there. It's just slow. Plus the fact, I think like everybody else, what we're really focused on right now is volunteer recruitment and how to do that effectively. We need them desperately because of all the changes that have gone on over the last 3 years. So we're like everybody else.
Looks like
Yeah.
Kathy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think the question about how were volunteers involved in planning in 2023 is at different levels, right? So there's like the state plan, sit way back and say, what are we going to do? But then there's the planning, really getting into the meat and potatoes of the work. So I wondered, not everybody heard Sandy's comments maybe at the beginning of the time, but Sandy, you were talking about volunteers involved in planning with the way that you said you approached some of the ideas they had in Minnesota. So would you mind just repeating some of those things that you said, Sandy?
Sure. One thing, the Minnesota State Office, they're very open to listening to volunteers' ideas and thoughts. And so if we come up with an idea, they tell us to run with it and get it all figured out. And then bring it, present it to them, and they can see if they can make it happen. So basically like this kayaking event, we did canoeing before, but we kept hearing that people wanted to kayak. So we found an organization and we brought it back to the state office staff. And they did the behind the scenes legal stuff and everything, whatever has to be done. And we're able to make it happen. And then of course it's all volunteer led. So they're not having to go out and find the organization or set it up and that. We just bring it to them. And then they do whatever they have to behind the scenes and give us a call back and say, okay, we've got it set up in this date. Can you run it? Yep. Okay. And that's it. So, and we've done that with a snowshoeing event. To them, we can snowshoe in. We've got a couple naturalists. Can we do this? What's the cost? And they tell us yes or no. So we try to take the load off the state office to do more events.
Okay. So Kathy, when you put it that way, like as far as planning, like planning for events and getting volunteers involved, it's a little different than what I initially thought when I first spoke, because I thought you were talking about projecting strategically for the coming year. So even though we have gotten, from virtual to in-person, and this year has really been our trial period like everybody else, but we have had some very wonderful in-person events, and we have had some volunteers that have made suggestions about potential events that they want to attend. And they even, some of them have had connections with a particular partner, such as like bowling or even just doing mini golfing. So they have initially made those connections and passed them on to the state office. And some of them have even, plan just how the event would go. So if that's what you're looking at, that's how we've been slowly getting our volunteers involved.
Greg has his hand up.
Right.
Just a quick question. I'm kind of interested as these are all coming up. Do they filter through a committee in anybody's state or in Minnesota? I have a feeling now that there really isn't some formal channel for a lot of this. And I'm just interested in how other states are going about it. I'm frankly not sure if there are a lot of ideas on things people want to do. And given our state, we have such a small participation on portal usage that, even sharing insight or requests is difficult because it isn't reaching a large body of volunteers, much less members.
So Mary or Sandy, do you want to speak to that? How you all are, sounds like getting the information out and then working through the planning process.
I guess our big thing is, we've got a couple of volunteers, including myself and a couple others, that have really stepped up to the plate and trying to build a better relationship between the volunteers and the state office, so that we can go back to the state office and talk to any member of the state office and say, hey, so-and-so volunteers come up with this idea. What do you think? What do we need to do to help make this happen? And building a better relationship, and they're putting more onto us to get the results of finding the venues. How many people do you want? How much is this going to cost us? And things like that, where they're not having to go do the work before like they did before COVID. That's a big difference now. Before they did it all at the state office and they couldn't keep up. And now we're able to have more events because they're listening to the ideas from the volunteers, and the volunteers are working hard to set things up.
And this is an
We're just
informal.
better together.
Sorry, I stepped on you. Is this an informal committee that you've just kind of all had similar interests?
My partner and I, we do a lot with AARP, and we talk to a lot of different volunteers. And then we just tell them, call so-and-so at the state office and tell them your idea, or send them an email, or we'll just present it to them. So there's no real committees or meetings or groups or anything. It just might be a phone call that started the whole process. And it ends up to be 3-4 phone calls, and that's it. And now we've got another event.
We have a monthly planning meeting, and Concord has it. We have a community in Concord and one on the Seacoast. And we're trying to have a presence, not a community per se, but at least a presence in other parts of the state. But the monthly meeting, I think, is kind of key, because we set aside some time to brainstorm some ideas. And yes, volunteers will email the state staff person, or, when they see the state staff person in person, they'll say, hey, I've got this great idea. So we've got a combination, but we actually have people that, come up with the ideas and the planning meeting. And I have to say, we took the month of July off, not to have a meeting, but we have had more events in the month of July than I recall, even pre-COVID. I'm a little exhausted right now, I have to tell you, but I think it's really picking up a lot of momentum, because people keep constantly generating ideas, and the staff person has ideas. So it seems to be gelling into this nice little, I want to say mesh, but it just seems to be just really moving along quite nicely. And we do try to encourage, I know I do, I try to encourage people that come up with ideas to kind of take the lead. just this game night, for instance, somebody said, well, why don't we have a sub team? And I said, okay, then do you want to lead it? And he said, okay, fine. So, and this perfect is doing perfectly fine leading this group, and still communicating, with me and with the staff person. So I kind of think having some monthly meeting of form of communication does really help.
Ellen, would you like to ask the question you put in the chat to the
Oh, sure.
group?
I was just curious, are we talking events for volunteers only, or are these, you all are planning events for public members, things like that?
Public members, the
Oh, okay.
community.
Fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
I agree. The regular meetings is definitely a great landing spot.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ellen, and thank you for that first question. Dr. Mary, would you like to lead us in the next?
Sure, and I just want to say what an engaging conversation and a demonstration of how volunteer leadership occurs organically in both those examples that Mary and Sandy provided. So thank you for providing those. And forgive my light, I'm in a room that I have no control over the lighting. So you might not see me, but I hope you can hear me. The second question is, have you developed mission, vision, and value statements for and with your community teams or your executive councils? So again, have you developed your mission and vision and value statements for your community and with your community, involving your team, your staff team, your volunteers, or your executive councils? And if so, what was the process that you used to involve them in developing these mission, vision, and value statements? And was it a workable statement? That's a lot. And I'm not in a place where I can type easily. Kathy, can you type that? Do you have the ability to type that?
Sure. Happy to, Mary. Thanks.
So I'll read it one more time because it was a mouthful. Have you developed a mission, vision, and value statement for your community and with your community teams, your volunteers, or your executive councils? And if so, what was the process that you used, and did it result in a workable statement? Anybody have an experience that they want to share about that?
Okay, while people are thinking about that, I do want to let you know that one of the advantages of the exchange has been that we've created a repository of information. And I don't know about you, but I personally forget how much stuff is out there periodically. Got to go through. And if you're got questions about wanting or how to design your planning meetings or those monthly meetings, or even want to hold something, we've got a guide that's out there called Designing Your Planning Meetings for High Participation and Impact. And it has all the questions that you might want to ask to try to make sure that you've got a meeting that gives you what you want. Another thing that's out there is the State Planning Discussion Guide for Staff and Volunteer Leaders. That was for 23. It is dated 9/8 of 22, which is just amazing. We end up on the same date, but it's August. We're just a month ahead. But that's a 6-page document. And we have, and the first thing, if you go into the files on the chatter group, and that's what's on the portal, it's called the Exchange Chatter Group. And the first file that you need to check, or you can check, is a list of all of the documents, the outline. all of these planning type documents are in something called 2B. They will have a 2 and a B, and there are multiple documents that you can use. So just wanted to get that out there. And another thing, I did check with OVE before we had this meeting, and I know we've got representatives here, but the leader of OVE provided me just a little bit of guidance in that he's expecting very minor changes from last year's planning questions. So any of the information that you may be able to pull out of the exchange files or information you may have used last year is likely going to be very close to the same thing. And if there's anything that's specific that you or your communities would like to have from OVE, you can always reach out to your advisors, and there are 3 of them. I think at least 2 of them are on now. Kathy Kynes is one, Tara Shaver is one, Christina Anastasio is out on maternity leave, but Lisa Collier is here from Tennessee as an interim. So she is available, and they're all available. And the only third thing that he suggested is that you involve your community-based volunteer teams and executive councils in all of the planning discussions as much as possible.
Thank you. And let me give maybe a smaller question that can be responded to. And I think an example of it was already given by Sandy and Mary. So this question is, how much do you depend on your volunteers to develop community relationships? And I think we just saw an example of that. And do you have any specific examples that you can share? Much like Mary and Sandy just shared with us. Does anyone have any other examples of people you know, relationships that you have that turned into maybe an event or a potential event for the future? Becky.
Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Yes, actually, we have a lot of events going on that are being planned by volunteers and staff. But I moved to a location where I'm kind of in between. We're not a community of presence, but I get involved with the chamber, the local Woodburn Chamber of Commerce, and we have a lot of events in Woodburn that we have kind of piggybacked on the chamber. They partner with different members. Also the city council too, I'm involved with them.
Thank you. Those are excellent examples. Anyone else?
Can I ask a follow-up question of Becky?
Sure.
Becky, I think I heard 2 things. One is that you're not in a place that has a formal team, but you want to be active and have a presence. So I think
Absolutely.
I think that's really interesting, because a lot of ARP's work focuses on where there are teams, and a lot of states have big expanses without teams. So that for you to thread that needle, what you're saying is you find community partners. And for example, can you give an example of something you've done or ARP's done with those community partners?
Well, the Chamber of Commerce was one. When I was in another county, I was a lot more, that was part of the tri-counties, which is very dominant, and AARP is dominant in those areas, but I moved out of there. So now I'm in Marion County, and a couple things that happened is we have we're probably 65% Latino. I might have had that a little bit high, but we've got a large Latino population, and so we do a lot of fiestas, and so I've been involved with I've helped table a booth with the Chamber of Commerce here in Woodburn. for those events, and also ribbon cutting.
Thank you, Becky. And while you're thinking about either of the questions I asked, I want to put in a plug for some of the services that are offered by the Volunteer Facilitation and Training Team, otherwise known as VFIT, of which I'm a member, and Deborah, and we have several other colleagues. If your team is interested in working on a mission, vision, values statement, or work surrounding that, our team is available to assist you in doing so. All you need to do is reach out to one of our advisors, which is Kathy Kynes, Tara Shaver, or Lisa Collier. The state directors can reach out to them, and they will let us know that your request is in progress, and we'll get someone to support you in your efforts. So just a plug for some services that are available. Christine?
Hi, everyone. So to answer the last question, there's a lot going on here. But how do we get our volunteers to get out in the community and get involved and so forth, right?
Right.
So we actually have, some of our partners are actually on our volunteer team. We have several that they're not a normal volunteer, but they do come to our meetings now and then, in particular to announce something going on. For example, one of the people that are listed as a volunteer / partner, she's in charge of the senior center in the city, Christy Sandbaugh. And, we are closely tied to her, and it's a wonderful partnership, of course, because we are keeping each other involved, and she lets us know when there are critical events going on that AARP, can help with, but also engage with the community and so forth. And our team just took off in this past year. We actually have over 40 listed as volunteers. So now we're going through and I'm actually meeting with each one individually to check on their status, how much do they want to be involved, their ideas, and what they can see would needs improvement. So that's an example, is signing up your partners to be actual volunteers. They're not a normal volunteer, but they do show up and they are getting our emails. They know what's going on. And when they see something that we might be interested in partnering with, they let us know. So I think having that monthly to a couple times a month email coming from us, we are tied together.
That's a great example. Thank you. And another similar relationship that I know many of us have are with fraternities and sororities and partnerships. And some of those individuals may also be volunteers. And so that's a very rich group to tap into, as well as potential volunteers if you haven't thought about that. The last part of this question is, do you have any regular method of debriefing or gathering volunteer input about community relationships or involvement that your volunteers have with the community? Anybody want to respond to that question? Or any
Mary,
of the—
could you repeat it and I'll type it?
Sure. Do you have a regular method of debriefing to gather volunteer input? And this might be at your monthly or quarterly meetings. Do I see Sandy with your hand up?
Something we do, especially on the smaller events, and that what is after the event is over, we will send an email. We don't gather together much or do a lot of Zooms. It's just through emails and phone calls with the state office. But something they started with this, the process is right before COVID hit, the pandemic hit, they wanted a volunteer-led organization, basically of each event for whether it was livable communities or advocacy or what, but try to get more volunteer led. And so the state office is more as a guide of their do's and don'ts and everything. But for especially like livable community stuff, the events within the community, it's all volunteer ran. And we just go to the state office for guidance and help with things. So then at the end of like today now, after my kayaking event, I will get a hold of the state office person and give them a briefing, whether it's by phone or an email. And that's just all we do. We don't gather much for meetings and that stuff. But everything is volunteer led. I mean, as far as the different groups, like we have what we call on tap. I don't know if you've ever heard of anything like that, where we go to a brewery.
Tell us a little bit more, because some people may not have heard about it.
So we have a group, a lead group that goes around and checks out the different breweries, and then we set up an event with a brewery. And what we do is we take a food donation from the participants. And it's actually under community engagement events is probably how you guys would recognize it more. But anyway, so we gather a food donation, and then we will give them a free beer, and they get a tour of the brewery for free. And then we give that all the food donated to the brewery, and they give it to the choice that they would like to whatever food shelf they want in their name. ARP is not a part of that. So we gather little food, we get them out, check, and then we either have like, every time we have on tap, we have a theme. Next month, we're gonna have one, and we're gonna talk about Social Security a little bit. The following month, we're gonna have one in November. We're gonna talk about veterans with AARP and things like that. So we're trying to incorporate all of our community engagement events with a theme, getting information out there, and then just gathering the people up. So, but with the on tap, it's all volunteer ran. And then we have the staff person will meet with us right before the event. We'll go over things, and then she's like, okay, it's a go, let's go. And we run it all. And a staff person may show up, may not. And that's just kind of how we run things up here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So they put a lot of trust into us volunteers.
What a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And it's a win-win-win situation for the volunteer, gets to socialize and gets to contribute to the community by the food donation. They get to learn a little bit about the brewery, a topic of AARP, and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Let me see in the chat, Carmel says that as a staffer, I know that staff still has to do things like logistics, signing off on contracts and payments. So in some instances where those items are involved, yes, those do have to have the involvement of the state staff and the office. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Carmel.
Yeah, but one of the things that we can do, and this is back to the VFIT group, we actually have a session called Yours, Mine, and Ours, and we can run that with volunteers and staff to reiterate what things can be provided or managed by staff and volunteers, because most of us as volunteers can do a lot more than sometimes we think we can within the system. But it helps to have sometimes those types of sessions to at least understand what the rules are, because they do change periodically. So
They do.
Okay.
So,
Mary.
some of our debriefing, it depends on what it is. I think when we have ice cream nights or the movies for grownups, I ask the volunteers if they could just hang back for about 5 minutes, just to kind of see how things went, what could be better. We were in the midst of one ice cream night, and a volunteer made a suggestion of how we should do the line. And I said, okay, that's fine, go with it, and it actually worked out well. So I think it is important to get the volunteer feedback as to how they think an event went. And if the event is close to a monthly meeting, then of course that's going to be one of the topics for discussion. Because through that, I think it becomes a learning process for all of us, the volunteers and the staff, to say, okay, this worked, this didn't work. It's not a perfect situation, so you have to be flexible with things that go and happen. And that's the one thing. But I think it's really important to get the input. And I think, and I'm hoping Ashley agrees with me, is that we are trying to be a little bit more helpful in what she does, because we do have some volunteers that will go and actually come up with an idea. And I'm going to use our bowling night. It was bowling day, where the theme was to fight fraud, and every event we have does have a theme. We went blueberry picking. It was called Very Good Ways to Fight Fraud. We have shredathons. So I have to say it's been a busy year, but we really have had a lot going on. And I think it's because we do have that input and that partnership. I think we have a really great relationship with the staff office and the volunteers. So I think that's one of the key things to making it all work.
Thank you, Mary. Great examples, all of you, for sharing. Thank you so much. Deborah?
Yes. I don't know. Okay. I was trying to figure out, where do we go from here? We've had so many comments in the chat that actually could lead us into additional questions. But one of the things I wanted to make sure we accomplished today, this is the time of year that for the exchange, we try to look forward. You know, we've got September, October, November, December coming up. The topics are already out there, but I want to make sure that these are things that are still relevant for you, so that we can have a discussion about them and that they will help you. So I'm going to launch a poll. I'm sure this makes some people really happy, if you can, or not. So I'm going to make sure. Can you see this poll?
Yes.
Yay. Okay, and what these are the 4 topics that we have scheduled for the rest of the year. But if these are not what are going to be useful for you, there's an other category. And then what I've done, because of course we all want to use things like QR codes, right? So I've put into the chat, if I can do it here. Okay, you now have the QR code to access a form, just a plain old Microsoft form, that then gives you 2 lines. It says, what do you want? What do you think is a good topic for 23? And if you've got a suggestion for 24, you can stick that in the next line. So feel free to do that. And I will be leaving that open for, I think I've got to shut down on the 18th of the month. So, because I've got to have time to get the information to Justin for the OVE update to make sure that your topics are out there. So, okay. So does everyone see the QR code?
Yes, and it works perfectly. I pulled it up on my phone.
Yeah, the first time I tried it today was before the meeting, and I forgot I'd set it for 2 o'clock, and it said, this form is not accepting input right now. So I had to go back in and change the time real quick. Okay, well, I'm sure we've got enough comments here. And so can you see the results?
Yes.
on the poll?
Sure can.
Yes.
Okay. And gosh, isn't that interesting? The one of the first early comments that people made today was about recruiting and retaining volunteers, that's something that people are interested in. And that looks to be the one that's got the highest option. Great. Well, this is your meeting. So, if it's not doing what you need, please let us know, because Dr. Mary and I and Ellen and the rest of the OVE staff will do everything we can to try to make this useful. I'm going to stop sharing this now. Okay. Right. Yay. Okay. Any other questions, comments for today?
I just want to thank everybody for the wonderful ideas. It looks like Merlin, you wanted to say
Yes.
something?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
loud
can.
and clear.
My name's Mary Lynn Smith, Lexington,
Mhm.
Kentucky. I'm also on the executive council and the lead volunteer in Lexington. I've enjoyed listening to all of you to understand, to hear what to do. As a volunteer and a lead volunteer, I'd like to make a comment. What we've instituted here under the work of Christine is called power teams.
Mhm.
And our power teams cover several areas, and they're all led by volunteers. In addition to that, every event and activity is led by a volunteer, and they all submit a one paragraph or two evaluation of the event and pictures, and then I compile it all together along with the help from Daniel and put it into a report that we submit to the executive council. And then what we do, Daniel, Christine, and I meet regularly, Zoom meetings and all during the day. Sometimes I say, please forgive me, ladies, AARP needs to pay me because all the work is done, but it's very refreshing. And under our power teams, we have the event support team, the business meeting team, the advocacy team, the volunteer support team, communications outreach team, and the veterans team. And they get to select what team they want to be on. We also have that there's a limit of 3 activities that they participate in. When we do our meetings, we do in person and Zoom for those because our partners who are still on our team as well, they're at work. So we Zoom into that. In terms of their feedback, they give us the feedback after each event. They give us the feedback also at the meetings, and we make sure that's a part of the criteria. And prior to what Christine, Daniel, and I will be doing at the end of the year, we will be meeting with all of the lead volunteers for all of the power teams to do an end of the year evaluation and to come up with how we can streamline it, make it more effective for them. And the activities that we're participating in really come from them. And they recommend, and some of them we carry over from year to year. In fact, last week we had 3. And there were different volunteers. One was veterans, one was the smooth jazz for senior citizens, one was a medical one. And I don't get to go to all of them, but I do, as the executive council and the lead person, contact everyone. We go through all of the protocol for each activity. And I found out, being an educational background, that when people are engaged and you take their input and you allow them to evaluate, they come back, they come back, and they come back. And we have, and some things we can't do because we have so much and we're limited in terms of a lot of things. And we are now getting ready to implement the rural outreach in the 6th district of which I'm over. So
Okay.
I've enjoyed this. Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilyn. I hate to cut you off here, but one of the things that is so nice that she is in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and our experiences and in terms of how the teams and things run are totally different. But I have all this information that Marilyn and Christine were providing. And I think having, now that you've said this, Marilyn, this becomes an example. So I think we need to share this on the chatter group. So with your permission, I've got your notebook that was provided.
Okay,
So, okay, because I think all of these various models will help us make sure that we've got something that attracts people and keeps them engaged. So thank you all for your feedback today. Thank you, Dr. Mary, for your help. Thank you, Ellen, who's had to run off, but she's put in even more questions and comments for next time. I can't say enough about you, Mary, and Becky, and Jackie Cooper, Christine, and on and on and on. I don't want to leave anyone out, but just being here has been a wonderful help for us. So we're going to get the topics out, reconfirm all of that information, get that out to you so that you've got some time to think about how do you want to be engaged, what other pieces there are that you want to see for September. Okay, so thank you all very much. Trust that you stay safe and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Okay. All right. Tara is still here.
She is. Do you want to stop recording, Deborah?
Yeah, well, see, I didn't, yes.